Hello, I'm Mimi. I'm a digital illustrator, and you might have seen that I recently illustrated my first picture book and made a video last month about the publishing and editorial process for it. Today though, I want to take you through my creative process for illustrating my first book, and I'll explain some things like how I decided on the layouts, the technical details, and just generally my thought process behind the spreads. So HarperCollins Australia were the publisher for this book, and they provided me with the text, which was written by Sarah Ayub, and then they mostly left the creative part of the pictures to me and gave me some time to illustrate the spreads. If you watched my other video about this book, you'll know that I started my illustration process with some really rough thumbnail sketches of the layouts, then I did some digital sketches, and then I illustrated the final color artwork. So once I had the text for the book and lots of time alone to create some illustrations, how did I decide on the layouts? I had 12 internal spreads to draw, and all I really knew to begin with was that I didn't want every spread to be built the same. I wanted visual variety so that each spread was a little different from the last. The only other thing that I immediately knew was that I wanted the book to start calm, build in energy, and then end on another calm note. So first I did some research. I popped over to my local library and borrowed some children's picture books and collected some ideas from them about the types of layouts I might be able to use. I drew some super rough little thumbnails, but then pretty much went straight into drawing my draft sketches in Photoshop. A lot of the thumbnails changed as I developed the ideas into sketches. If we look at all of the sketches together and then simplify them down to their most basic silhouettes, you can see how I chose to vary the spread layouts. I didn't really want too many full-page spreads back to back, and I also tried not to repeat the same layout too often either. As well as needing to consider the image layouts, I also need to consider the text layout. I don't get the final say in where the text goes or how it looks, but I leave a space on the page for the book designer to lay out the text, and on some pages, how I illustrate the spread kind of does determine where the text can sit. So I wanted to make sure that the text wasn't always going to be in the same place on every page. My job as an illustrator of a picture book is to represent the written text, and also to expand on the story with my own visual language. When I read the text, it felt to me like it was starting calm and heartfelt, and then building in pace with lots of activities and fun metaphors before calming down again at the end. And I wanted to mimic that in the energy of my illustrations. So I kept that in mind while I illustrated my sketches, and then as well when I went on to illustrate the final illustrations, and this is what I ended up with. The first couple of spreads are simple with lots of white space and calm colors. There's not too much going on, the colors are soft, and that to me helps to give a visual representation of calm energy. The third spread is a little busier and introduces a full scene and some movement with the noodle, and then from spreads 4 through 9, I try to incorporate more energy by having things that suggest movement, like falling pages and swirling details, or by having big spreads with lots of things happening, or vibrant colors. This starts to calm down again by spread 9, and then for spreads 10, 11, and 12, I try to bring us back to that calm energy with my composition and colors to end the book. Having that arc of energy throughout the book as a foundation helped direct lots of choices that I needed to make about the compositions, the poses of the characters, the colors I used, and when to include dynamic details that suggest movement. So let's dive a little deeper into a few elements of the illustrations. Characters. I can't actually remember or find in my emails who first suggested that we have a single parent family, but sometime early on it was decided that we would just have a mum and her children as the characters. The book is about how love for children grows and grows with each new addition to the family, so I thought 3 kids would be a good amount to explore that idea with. As far as designing the characters goes, I kind of drew them how I normally draw people, and just made sure that I gave them a variety of skin tones, hairstyles, and clothing colors. I didn't draw the characters on every single page because it didn't feel totally necessary, and people are the most difficult part of the book to draw, so I left a few pages without any characters on it to give myself and the reader a break here and there. Humans are hard to draw and not really a strength of mine, so don't look too closely at the hands and general proportions of the characters in this book. The great thing though is that the audience for this book is little kids, and they're probably not going to care if some of the hands look a little odd. As long as I take them on a fun journey through this story, then that's all that really matters. The other thing I thought about with the characters was giving them simple poses for calm spreads and more dynamic poses for more energetic spreads. Color palette. I usually go for fairly muted, natural color palettes, and this book is no exception. I went for colors that I'm fairly familiar with using, like pink and green together with some purple, blue, and orange. I knew that I would be using quite a bit of pink in this book because it's about love, and I was going to be drawing lots of hearts. And I love pink and green together, so I took the opportunity to incorporate green plants with pink flowers throughout the book. For night scenes, I chose a purple sky with some pink blended through it because it felt softer to me than using the traditional navy or black. Colors don't always have to be realistic, especially in a children's picture book. Overall, I wanted the colors to be quite soft and gentle, so I used lots of pastels with a bit more vibrancy and energy through the middle of the book. Motifs. As a book about how love has the capacity to grow, I knew I wanted to fill this book with love hearts. Each page has at least one heart, and often some extra ones hidden about the place as well. We're going on an adventure with the family in the book to explore how big and bright and beautiful love is, so I wanted hearts to be in all of the metaphors we see. I also just think it's fun to go looking for all the hearts in the book and see if you can find them all. There's also a motif of flowers throughout the book, as I start the book with a flower with 3 smaller buds as a reference to the family and as a symbol of love and life growing. I sprinkled these flowers throughout the book as a symbol of growth, and also because they're pretty and I like drawing them. Now let's talk about the technical part of creating these illustrations. I illustrated the whole book in Adobe Photoshop and drew each spread as a different Photoshop file. I was given the technical requirements by HarperCollins, but they're pretty standard for printing, so I drew everything on a canvas of 300 ppi in CMYK color mode at the size they specified, which was 297 by 420 mil, plus 5 mil of bleed on all sides. If you're not sure what bleed is, it's basically an extra margin of safety that you add to images that are being printed. Pages are usually printed larger than the final size and then trimmed down. And because the printing and cutting process isn't 100% accurate, it's important to have the image extend a little further than needed in case things get cut a tiny bit differently to what you intended. If you didn't have bleed and things moved by a millimeter during the printing process, then you might end up with a small white margin on some edges of the page, which isn't what we want. So I added bleed to the dimensions of the spreads, and because it's 5 mil on all sides, I needed to add 10 mil to each dimension and ended up with a canvas size that's 430 by 307 mil for all of the internal spreads. When I'm illustrating, it's handy to be aware of what is the final cropped image and what is bleed. So for me to visualize that, I made a blue margin as a shape layer above all of my other layers and reduced that opacity so that I could always see that whatever was under the blue margin was just the bleed area and is likely to be trimmed off. If I needed to visualize the spread without bleed, so how it would be cropped, I had another layer that added a white margin to help me easier see what the cropped artwork would look like. That's just how I chose to visualize it. I'm sure there are lots of other ways to do it too. I also had a blue line down the middle of each spread so that I could visualize the center of the book where the pages meet. And it's handy to keep in mind that depending on how a picture book is bound, the area near the middle of the spread could be obscured by the bend of the pages when they're bound. All of my visual guides are on separate layers that can easily be turned off when it's time to hand them over to the publisher. I mostly illustrated the book using Carl's Natural Feel brush from Carl's Mega Pack, which is available through Adobe, and I used my normal illustrating process of drawing a sketch and then using that as a reference to illustrate all of my color layers underneath. If you'd like to know more about my general illustrating process, you can find videos about it over on the beautiful Bluebell tier of my Patreon. If you have any questions that I didn't cover today, feel free to ask them as a comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you enjoyed this video, then consider subscribing to my channel or consider giving this video a like because it helps my channel grow. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!